Today on episode 119 of Rail Talk, we discuss early retirements of stallions to the breeding shed, John's excellent result at Keeneland January with Tiffany Case, Breeders' Cup sitting on $100 million, and much more. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. And John, it was a bad weekend for me for hate watches in the NFL playoffs until Aaron Rodgers got shuffled off of this NFL mortal coil and got the crap beaten out of him and lost 30-6. Obviously, I'm a bitter Jets fan, but come on, I can't be the only one who enjoyed that.
Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable. Yeah, Joe, when you were in the opening, when you were talking about, hey, early retirements, I'm like, is he talking about me? Is he talking about Aaron Rodgers? Is he he's talking about the Colts off the racetrack. Whew, thank God. I can't wait to talk about all this stuff. Let's go.
The opinions expressed on Rail Talk are those of hosts Joe Bianca and Jon Green and do not reflect those of anybody we work with or work for. Rail Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade. Shout out to the team at TaylorMade. Well, John's got the hat. That's a nice hat, too. I would wear that on the golf course if I ever golfed. TaylorMade obviously has had tremendous success in the sales ring, so nothing is new to them, but it had to be a special thrill with John and Len sending Tiffany Case through the ring. Obviously did a great marketing job with her, as they do with all of their horses. You know, their specialty, so to speak, is the yearling sales, but they do it all. Broodmares, horses of racing age. So if you got a nice horse that you're thinking of selling this year, give TaylorMade a call or go to tailormadefarm.com. Obviously the stallion roster is exploding too. Not this time the hottest stallion in the world. I mentioned a couple early votings that we have. We have a Tacitus, a lot of nice horses on the, and let's not forget about Nick Sko and Ewing, who's coming back to the races in the next handful of weeks. So a lot of nice horses on that stallion roster as well, and some good value. Obviously not this time's book is full, but there's other horses that you want to get in on the ground floor on. So just appreciate everybody at TaylorMade for their partnership and another year with y'all, and doing great things for DJ Stable and for the industry as a whole. TailorMadeFarm.com to learn more. Malibu winner is already retired. And Malibu was like 2-3 weeks ago, and Goal Oriented, who won the Malibu very impressively, got a 108 buyer. I think he got a 4 Ragazin, 1 by open length, stopped the clock in 120 and change. He is now retired to Spendthrift Farm, and this got a lot of attention on racing Twitter. And this is kind of like an ongoing theme and thing that like people have complained about for a long time. I think rightfully so. Horses getting whisked off to the breeding shed too quickly. And before anybody says it, because I know somebody's going to say it, yes, I know Flightline only started 6 times. That obviously wasn't my decision. It wasn't even entirely West Point's decision. It's also apples to oranges for a horse that won the Breeders' Cup Classic and was worth 9 figures, to the point where it's like basically impossible to insure them for enough money. So yes, I would have loved to see Flightline race more, but like don't come yell at me about that. It's a totally different thing. It was just kind of funny because after Goal Oriented's win on Twitter, somebody asked Tom Ryan of SF Racing or said he's ready for the breeding shed, and Tom goes, "No, not for a while. This colt is only finding his groove. He had his first start 8 months ago and has made 7 starts at 6 different tracks, including 5 at grade 1 level. His career high figures were earned yesterday. He was rightly declared a rising star on his first start. Deep bench of 4-year-olds in 2026. Great for racing fans." Well, I guess it wasn't great for racing fans, because 5 minutes later, the horse was retired to stud. And listen, the same way I'm saying that it wasn't my decision or West Point's decision entirely to retire Goal Oriented, it wasn't SF Racing's decision entirely. It wasn't Spendthrift's decision entirely. It was like there's a bunch of different owners. But this is the kind of thing that it's – I'm not going to say that Goal Oriented was going to have like a big fan base in 2026, but this is something that's been plaguing the sport for a long time. I think all the way back to, Justify retiring, even like going all the way back to Smarty Jones when he retired after the Belmont. Like Smarty Jones was not really a viable stallion prospect, but he was still worth a lot because he had won the Derby and the Preakness, and they decided to retire him. I don't know what the answer is, John, because we just have gone down so far down this road where breeding to sell mainly is so much more profitable than running on the racetrack over time that I can't really blame the individual entities for retiring horses. But, as Tinky said, Tinky had a thread about this, and this is one of his hobby horses. It's another one of those examples where people don't really think about the long-term health of the game and whether it's good, for whether it's fan interest, field size, like horses getting retired to stud, left and right, not great for field size in these big races. And I'm going to go back to what I usually say is, we kind of manage this game as if it's still the 80s sometimes. And as if there's still so much demand and the foal crop is booming and, we have graded stakes all over the place. Last weekend, there was a couple of stakes races for 3-year-olds. The Pasco drew 2 horses and wasn't able to run. The Jerome had 4 horses. The San Vicente had 5. Like, at what point do we as an industry realize, hey, we got to keep some of these horses on the track. Otherwise, there's going to be no races to run their progeny in.
Right. And I think, Joe, you bring up 2 different concerns. One is that, we have a declining foal crop and therefore we don't have just the inventory to be able to manage and run these preps or races in general. But we're talking about stake races because that's the lifeblood of breeding. And that's not up to like the graded stakes committee to make that determination of whether or not a stake should be invoked or should be renewed. That really comes down to the actual individual racetracks themselves. And I think they're finally seeing that some of these races are redundant or excessive. If you're only getting 2 or 3 horses entering a race, let alone, where you have some of these races that are running with 4 horses in them, maybe there's a reason why, and you don't need to have that race anymore. I know you'll lose some prestige, you lose some history. But at this stage of the game, the modern times have surpassed the history of the Busher or the Jerome or the Comely. Some of these races that historically, in the 80s and 90s, you had these superstars that were using them as Derby and Oaks preps. None anymore. People aren't really focused on a 7-furlong race at Tampa. No offense to Tampa, but at Tampa in beginning of January. They're not looking at that as a prep per se.
Right.
So it's not, that's why you're not getting, those races to fill or even to get, renewed. I think the Pasco in particular, they had 2 horses in it. They put it back on the, on the overnight. And I think the same 2 horses went in and they were scrounging. They called us for a horse that just broke his maiden for maiden 50, to run in there. And it doesn't do our horse any good to run in a race like that. So, that's one issue that is a legitimate issue. The second issue specifically, we're going to use kind of goal oriented as the example as for what's wrong in the breeding industry. And again, I'm not blaming Spendthrift or the farms or because there were multiple farms that were interested in the horse to stand at stud there. And I'm not blaming, Tom Ryan and SF and Starlight and their partnership because quite frankly, that would be the old saying, don't blame the players, blame the game. You can't blame them for finding, a business proposition that works for them and succeeding at it by having a horse win a grade 1 and then retiring at stud. Again, there's a question as to whether or not the horse was sound. That's not for us to answer because we're not in there, on the inside to know whether or not the horse is sound or not. But there were multiple farms that were bidding on him to stand at stud once he won the Malibu. Now, the 3 years from now, none of us will remember that the Malibu at the end of 2025 not only didn't have another graded stake winner, okay, but that one of the favorites in the race that probably, would have won the race in Barnes, had to scratch, before the race was run. So, again, I won't none of us are going to remember that. None of us are going to remember that, there was no journalism, sovereignty, Baeza, Citizen Bowl, Barnes, Chancellor McPatrick. None of us will remember that any of those horses didn't run, in this race. All we'll see is that Goal Oriented got a grade 1 next to his name. So, to me, it's a tainted grade 1, but it's still a grade 1. And the graded stakes committee didn't reduce it like they did other California races. And they could have. So, is it likely going to get downgraded for 2026? I think so, but that's just my opinion. But again, you can't blame the people who are, facilitating this business plan because the breeders are the ones that are booking 200, 250 mares to a horse like this. And obviously it's what they want. Okay. So, the marketplace is facilitating a 3-year-old grade 1 winner and he's a Not This Time, which we talk about all the time, is the hottest stallion in the country, from a really solid female family. He was a $425,000 yearling before Not This Time was Not This Time. So it was a legitimate amount of money. He's probably, really good looking. But I think if you had to put, a gun to their head and say, who do you really want to have won that race if you could have selected it, they probably would have selected Madacat Road or certainly Barnes or Cornucopia, maybe not even in that order. But I think there were three other horses where if they won this grade one, that they would have said, yep, the horse has done enough. It's a grade one. I'm not going to tarnish his legacy, and we're going to stand him at stud. And that's ultimately, I think, what they're doing with Goal Oriented. Again, not a horse that I'm going to breed to, okay? But there are 200 or 300 other breeders in the country that are running over there, not just walking over there, because the horse is full. The horse is booked out. You can't get a season to Goal Oriented right now. And that's even before they had like the open shows to go look at him this week for breeders. So obviously the system is saying we want horses like Goal Oriented. Okay. Whether or not it's the right thing to do for the industry, we can sit here and yell into the void all we want. But you know what? The business breeders, the commercial breeders want horses like Goal Oriented. They want horses like Papa Cap. They want horses like Golden Pal, Goodnight, Taba. They want horses that are solid on the racetrack, that win, a really good grade 2 or a grade 1 and come from a good solid family, from a sires, and they are running hand over fist to try to breed to those horses. Again, I'm not blaming the people involved in the system, because they're just exploiting the system. It's the knucklehead breeders that do this over and over again that make this plan, a winning formula.
Well, that's more of a question for you. Like a follow-up from me is like, we see it every year. There's these hot first crop sires, and their horses, their books are full, and their horses go for a lot of money with their first crop weanlings, yearlings, etc. And then if they don't have a bunch of runners on the track 10 seconds into their stallion progeny career, then everybody forgets about them, and they're either demoted to like another state or they're shipped overseas. Like, I don't see, I'm not in the breeding world, so I don't understand like this constant regenerative hype machine that almost never seems to bear out long term, like where horses that have that kind of hype early on end up being superstar stallions on the racetrack. A lot of times it's horses that did not have a ton of hype going into the breeding shed that end up being the biggest producers of winners on the racetrack. So John, like what is it? Why can't people like take a step back and, kind of wait for a horse's career to develop, or once they're going to the breeding shed, wait for their progeny's career to develop before they go crazy for these horses? Because again, it just seems to me from an outsider's perspective, like people are acting as if the foal crop is booming and there's so many great opportunities all across. I guess there are a lot of great opportunities on the racetrack, but I just can't understand this, cycle of hyping up these horses over and over again and then forgetting about them if they're not superstar stallions right away.
Yeah, it really comes down to blue sky. And basically, Joe, the breeders want to breed to a horse that hasn't stubbed his toe yet. Okay, so it used to be where you would breed to only proven stallions, and it was really hard to make an unproven horse, a commercial viability. Primarily because people were like, well, I don't know if this horse is going to do it. I'm breeding to race, so I want to make sure that I breed my mare to the most potent horse that has, a 5 to 10% probability of being a stake winner and has proven time and time again that it deserves to be, one of the top 20, 30 stallions that are out there. And then as less people are racing and more people are looking to breed to sell, it got down to, well, these horses haven't done anything yet to prove themselves on the market that they are a failure. Therefore, there's only blue sky ahead. There's only possibilities ahead. And I'm going to breed to the sexiest first year horse that I can afford, or that I can get into. And then they sell the foal because the foal basically no trainer can come in and say, well, yeah, I'm using an example. I had, 3 the factors and none of them could outrun me. So I'm not going to buy at the factor anymore. or I'm not going to buy a midshipman, or I'm not going to buy, an into mischief. I mean, pick your poison as far as, but so people come in preconceived, like, well, I've only had bad ones, so I'm not going to buy from this side. Well, these first year stallions haven't had good or bad, but mainly they haven't had bad. So there's only, a blue sky and potential that's out there. I think that's really the shift, is that we went from an industry that bred to race, and we wanted to have the most proven commodities possible, to breeding to sell, and we want to have the most untainted possibility of a foal out there, because nobody else could compare it to one that they've already owned. So I think once that paradigm change occurred, that's when the shift went from proven to completely unproven, but completely, new and shiny and just off the rack. And that's why I want to breed to them. And again, if you look at these mares, like, you'll see commercial farms and programs, and what they'll do is you can almost go back and say, okay, they have this mare and it went to 4 unproven stallions in a row, and every single stallion was a first year stallion, and they all sold really well. Well, you know what? Now, after 4 foals, is it the mare that's a clunker because she's not producing winners? Or is it that, these stallions ended up not being good, which most of them fall into that category? And therefore, I'm kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I don't know if it's my mare that I should be getting rid of because of her foals aren't good, or because these new stallions just haven't been good, and I've just been picking them because they're most commercially viable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to pick your brain about this also on the longevity standpoint, because that's something that Tinky talks a lot about, because the speculation is that there's an injury with goal oriented, just because of like what I read with Tom Ryan saying, this is just the beginning and blah, blah, blah. And then 5 minutes later, he's retired. Obviously, I don't know. I'm not there, but that people are trying to put 2 and 2 together and saying, well, he popped up with an injury. He's going to take like 6 months to, get back on the racetrack. Might as well retire him now. He did only start 7 times. As I said, Flightline started 6 times. Like, there's a lot of horses on the racetrack these days that did not start a ton of times, but are super popular for the breeding shed. And obviously, it's not a exact science. Like, Malibu Moon start 3 times, go back to Danzig, didn't start all that often. Into Mischief started 6 times. So it's not like a 1-to-1 thing where if you started 30 times, your expectation can be to be this successful. But I do agree with Tinky's overall general point that horses that do not make a lot of starts and are not as hardy, probably not great for the breed going forward to have, all of those horses dominating the breeding shed. How do you look at it? How do you and Len look at it when you're making breeding decisions? Does that factor in like how long the horse raced and how many times, how long, et cetera, versus kind of how brilliant they were?
Yeah, I think that years ago when we were breeding, more along the lines of trying to have a commercial program, we were kind of getting seduced by breeding these new horses, regardless of how many times they ran. If it was from good bloodlines, a good family, a good program, and they had shown either brilliance or consistency on the racetrack, we were going to breed to them if the price point matched up. We've actually gone 180 degrees, Joe, and now we're breeding our mares to proven stallions. And primarily because, believe it or not, if you look at the comparables, it's actually better value to breed, in our estimation, to breed to a proven stallion than it is to an unknown, because you just, again, you could have great expectations or not. But we keep our mares, again, pre-reduction. We're keeping our mares for years and years and years. So I wanted to have some kind of a consistency to know if it was our mare the issue or the stallion. So that's just what we do as our program, is that we're trying to breed to, the Into Mischiefs, the Not This Times, the Nyquists, horses of that ilk. And if our mares don't make sense to breed to $150,000 to $200,000, stallions, which a lot of them do, but a lot of them don't, then we're falling back into breeding to the more consistent, stallions that maybe aren't as sexy because they're a little bit further along the line. When we bred Tiffany Case to Medaglia d'Oro, people were saying like, oh, it's an off year. You shouldn't be breeding to Medaglia because he hasn't had a superstar in a couple of years. And it was when his stud fee was on the decline. Well, we saw it as an opportunity and said, we're going to breed to this horse because he throws really consistent runners, especially with his family. So, I think we're kind of unique in the breeding industry from that sense, in that we want to breed proven to proven. So, when you breed a potato to a potato, you get a potato. Like, we want to know that, we have a pretty good idea of what we're getting on the way out. You have no idea with these new stallions what you're going to get or what the tendencies are, or if they looked really good and they were a good sales horse and a lot of people were excited about them, but they just got unlucky because he took a bad step, maybe pulled a tendon, what have you, and that's why he needed to be retired. Then, I give that more of a grain of salt than a horse that, ran brilliantly 2 or 3 times and basically never ran again, past that, because of a major injury. Again, Joe, we're speculating right now, but I can tell you from like our own experience with Sandman, for example. Sandman won the Grade 1 Arkansas Derby, and then ran 3rd in the Preakness. We were getting offers from Kentucky Stallion farms, and a lot of them had in their contracts, if the horse doesn't hit the board 2 races in a row, we have the right to retire him. Well, that's really difficult to do, to navigate, as an owner. Like, what do you do then? Do you run the horse in, a Grade 3 maybe to try to make sure that he stays out of that problem of not, it's a dilemma, but that's what a lot of the farms want. And quite frankly, the farms are putting up that kind of money to basically buy the breeding rights in a horse. And the horse does get injured and it's going to take 3, 4, 6 months off. Well, they don't want to miss this 2026 season. I'm not blaming Spendthrift. I'm not blaming the owners of Goal Oriented. They actually, I think from a financial standpoint, they did the right thing. But I think if the horse, was going to have a campaign as a 4-year-old, like a really serious campaign as a 4-year-old, they would have run him. I mean, that's what Tom Ryan said, is that their intentions were to run him in 2026. So I just think that, like, again, it's the system that we have in place right now. Not the system, it's the wrong word, but basically it's what breeders want and what commercial buyers want is the excitement of the unknown and the sexiness of a new horse rather than kind of a proven horse or one that's run a bunch of times. And I hesitate to say this, but a horse like Sierra Leone, who was a superstar and a champion and bred royally and paid literally millions of dollars for him as a yearling. I don't think from commercial breeder standpoint that he's as sexy to breed to as Citizen Bull.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably true. I mean, because Sierra Leone's horses are probably going to get better as they get older and go longer. So it's entirely possible that his first crop of 2-year-olds is not going to win big Grade 1 races. So that's something too, is, I feel like we've lost kind of the long-term vision on the racetrack of like, well, it's like, you got to win now. You got to win now. You got to win a 2-year-old race right now. And it's just those stallions that I think are longer developing horses are kind of becoming out of fashion. Mm-hmm. This is a great discussion. I appreciate your insight, John. And I want to piggyback onto it to talk about distorted humor. And what's funny is one of Distorted Humor's sons is basically the pinnacle of what we're talking about right now in McLean's Music. Right. McLean's Music ran once. He ran a 1:14 Beyer dominant victory. And I remember that being very, very controversial at the time when he was retired. It's like, well, the horse ran one time. Mm-hmm. How could you possibly expect breeders to breed to him thinking like he's a known quantity? And he's turned out to be a pretty damn good stallion. Yeah. Like, I mean, he's not like in the upper echelon, but he's had some really nice horses. And he was kind of like the opposite of Distorted Humor. And Distorted Humor passed in the past week at 33. Shout out to Distorted Humor. Yeah, right. Like his racing career, his stallion career, and even his life. Like, talk about longevity. So he made it to 33 years old was euthanized on Saturday. WinStar stallion, obviously a superstar stallion, but he on the racetrack, he ran 23 times. He ran 23 times. He won 8 races. He had 5 seconds and 3/3, earned over 750 grand. Was not a superstar on the racetrack, but was a 4-time graded stakes winner, grade 1 placed. So he was probably, I wasn't really interested in racing at the time because I was 5 years old, but I'm assuming he wasn't like a crazy fashionable stallion prospect right out of the gate, but man, did he, come through over time. He topped all freshman sires in 2002. He was North America's leading general sire in 2011. It's the same year his son Drosselmeyer won the Breeders' Cup Classic. And he's got a special connection to me too, because he was the sire of Funny Side. Right. And Funny Side was the horse that got me into racing in 2003 when he won the Kentucky Derby. So it's always have a soft spot for Distorted Humor there. From 23 crops, he had 167 stakes winners, 72 graded stakes winners, and his runners amassed earnings approaching $170 million. In addition to Drosselmeyer and Funny Side, he also sired Commentator, Any Given Saturday, Flower Alley, Hysterical Lady, Boisterous, Awesome Humor. He was a pretty good broodmare sire as well. And I always loved, his horses were money on the wet tracks. Yeah. Whenever it was a sloppy track, that's where you looked for the Distorted Humor progeny. But it's interesting, John, like, do you think a horse like Distorted Humor, if he retired with that resume right now, could he fill a book?
I think he could, because they would price him appropriately. And again, there's a science to that as well, as far as, taking the temperature of what makes sense. And the farms have gotten really good about that. But, he certainly wouldn't be as sexy as some of these flash, superstar horses that run brilliantly for a couple of races, and then some. But yeah, Joe, you talk about the fact that he's over 30 years old. That was a very different time, like in breeding 25 years ago. Again, that's when people were still breeding to race. So he was popular because of his stability and because of his consistency. And, was he like a horse that's going to run a 110 buyer? No, but that wasn't really the measuring stick back then. It was, what does the gene pool look like? What does he look like physically? And the fact that he did run over a number of years at a number of different distances, that excited people. So, rest in peace, Distorted Humor, because he was certainly a legacy maker, and he's going to be, if not is, a phenomenal broodmare sire, as well. So he will be, heard of and talked about still, 20 years from now, as his, daughters start to continue to carry the mantle of that genetic pool.
Yeah, no, a true throwback, and WinStar did a great job managing him. So condolences to the folks at WinStar. But talk about like a full life lived for a horse. So shout out to Distorted Humor, and a great conversation about kind of where we're at now in the breeding game, and kind of where we come from and where we're going. Real Talk is sponsored by Epic Insurance Brokers, one of the nation's top retail insurance brokers, providing expertise across key lines of insurance like property and casualty, employee benefits, and unique specialty insurance. You can hear me enunciating because I feel like I fly through this sometimes. And I want to give Chris and the team at Epic the time they deserve. Chris being Chris Moore, who leads Epic's equine specialty practice. You see him all over the place at the races, at the sales. He's got horses. This is his passion. He lives and breathes horse racing. And that's someone that you want in charge of anything involving money in this game, because every single dollar counts. And Chris and the team at Epic will take care of your insurance needs. And it's a complicated deal. There's a lot of different things to consider. There's prospective foal insurance. There's, mare insurance. There's insurance on the racetrack. John, I know you and Chris like chat pretty often. He's obviously a great fan of the show and friend of the show. He's the man. And before I toss it to you, John, 317-650-4519. If you want to start the conversation with Chris, do it, and do it now. But John, what have you guys been chatting about?
Yeah, what was nice about Chris is that he's on it. And, when Tiffany Case was entered into the sale, we went over, what would happen if we bought her back, and how we handled at that point the pro foal insurance, because she would then technically be on a no guarantee season, to not this time. So we talked about numbers like that. If for whatever reason, she got bought back, would that change the value? So we walked through a bunch of scenarios pre-sale. Thankfully, none of those came to fruition because we sold her. And Chris was really good. As soon as the horse sold, the echo of the gavel was still in the air, and he was texting me congratulations. And then very quickly, to Chris's credit, he pivoted and tweeted out, "Congratulations, DJ Stable, Keeneland, and TaylorMade." And as the former insurer of Tiffany Case, and then like in parentheses, Whisper Hill, I would still be happy to insure her. So Chris never stops hustling. And that's what you got to love about him, is that
that's what we love. And
he's on the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And I can't wait to see him at the Ocala sale in a little bit. Always love our Coronas at the Tiki Bar. So shout out to Chris and the whole team at Epic. And that brings us to this week's
Epic Performance of the Week.
Thank you, booming voiceover man. This week's Epic Performance of the Week was thunderously at Gulfstream Park for Bill Mott. He had two very impressive 3-year-old firster winners. The other one was Chief Wallaby. We could have, picked either one of them, but I thought thunderously was a little bit more visually impressive. He, kind of settled in mid-pack and, made this huge sweeping move to crush him, win by 5 lengths in the end. Gulfstream Dirt has been playing pretty slowly so far. This horse ran 145-4, but got an 87 buyer in the race. So definitely like a slower track, which I'm not used to seeing at Gulfstream in January, but slow, fast track, whatever. This was a very, very impressive horse. Another son of Gun Runner. So not, never surprising to see the Gun Runners pop in a big way. It's the kind of horse too, like when you see a horse for Bill Mott, it's kind of like shook. Like any kind of horse that runs that well first time out for a guy that over decades races his horses into fitness, it really puts your antenna up. And this is a very, very interesting horse going forward. And I honestly think we're looking at another potentially really nice 3-year-old crop. Ted Nuffy is obviously the leader in the clubhouse, going into his 3-year-old season. But, I was reading it before, like it looks like there's so many big figure horses this early in the year that I'm not used to seeing. So, John, I think there's like, other than Ted Nuffy, there's no like huge standouts yet, but it looks like a pretty damn good, deep 3-year-old crop, I would say so far.
Yeah. Are we still doing a commercial?
Yes. Epic. You want to say epic? Come on, the Epic Performance of the Week. Epic. Yeah. We're just talking, John. This is what we do on the show.
Are we still on? Is this on? Is this thing on?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, never mind. John's got nothing to say, apparently. But shout out to Chris and the whole team at Epic Insurance. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys. And keep doing what you're doing. And that's this week's Epic Performance of the Week. Real Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the #1 accounting firm in the horse business. No other CPA firm knows the horse industry like they do. Len and DJ Stable just sold Tiffany Case for $3.2 million. Sure to be some tax implications for that. And I wonder who Len goes to for his tax accounting needs. Oh, probably himself and the Green Group. And as you should, he saved so many people so much money across the business. It's a very complicated industry. Tax code is obviously very complicated. So you want someone who has experience doing this for decades to be in charge of those tax returns. We're already into mid-January. If you haven't yet, reach out to Len and the Green Group to get started on your 2025 taxes. And as always, there's a special offer just for you, listeners of Rail Talk. Don't tell anybody else. It's a complimentary, confidential, half-hour consultation in it for you. Len guarantees he'll find you value if you call him up. And what's that number, Michael Agresta?
732-634-5100. Green Group.
Or go to greenco.com to learn more. But you don't have to take it from me. Take it from our man, Eddie Woods. And just a quick Eddie anecdote. Eddie is stepping down from the OBS board, John said. So he's like officially going to be retired. He retired his consignment last year. Super character. When I first started doing like our trainer updates, we at West Point, we all have like our individual trainers that we talk to for the weekly updates. Eddie was my first guy. And talk about a baptism by fire, talking to Eddie Woods. Very, very plain spoken guy, but a super character. And I always remember we had a horse who won earlier this year named Willpower, second time starter at Tampa. And every time I talked to Eddie Woods during the week, he would say, he's a grand horse, Joe. He's a grand horse. And that grand horse came to fruition. So shout out to Eddie. We all love him. We're going to miss him in the industry, but great dude. Just like Len Green. Let Eddie tell you about how Len Green and the Green Group have helped him.
We've had a very good experience with the Green Group over
good period of time, very efficient, professional, knowledgeable, and helpful with all your financial doings. Very much ahead of the curve on a lot of the stuff that goes on, and will have you pre-warned about the stuff that's going to happen way before it happens. So it's always very helpful. They're seriously involved in the horse racing industry, so hence they understand it. It's an intricate business that not everyone gets, and be they smart financial people or not, our business is a little different, but they're just past everyone else with their knowledge on it.
Thank you, Eddie, and thank you, Len and the Green Group. As I mentioned, do not hesitate. Those tax returns are going to start piling up on Len's desk. Call him up at 732-634-5100 or go to greenco.com. Take advantage, seriously, of that exclusive offer for listeners of Rail Talk. I know a bunch of you have already. Go do it. Give Len a call or go to the website now. So this is something that's gained attention kind of over time. Mike Rapoli has talked about this. A lot of people have brought it up. But the amount of money that the Breeders' Cup is sitting on in their endowment. And Hillendale's owner, John Sikura, who's been on the show before, he was on our former show, The Writers' Room, last week, and was kind of challenging the Breeders' Cup to use that, particularly to shore up California racing, because John Sikura also in the past week was appointed to the Thoroughbred Owners of California board, which I think is good news for California racing in general. Very smart guy, kind of forward-thinking guy. And I'll just read his quote here. He said, "I've always been a huge critic of the fact that the Breeders' Cup keeps $100 million of nominators awards for a rainy day fund. In order to have a rainy day fund that needs $100 million, there would have to be a torrential flood of epic proportions. I might be a loner in the minority so far as my critique goes, but I don't believe the founders of the Breeders' Cup in their original statement and their original mission believed it was necessary to put away $100 million. When you have current crippling issues in our business that are affecting the validity of breeding programs in states and maybe even the existence of some markets, that money, in my strong opinion, should be put into use to help the thoroughbred industry. And if there's a cause more important than the survival of California racing, I don't know what that is." Now, the Breeders' Cup responded to that and said the endowment was managed by an investment committee and that all decisions regarding the endowment were evaluated and approved by the board of directors. They said that as a nonprofit whose mission is to conduct the Breeders' Cup with the highest levels of quality, safety, integrity, and to promote the growth of thoroughbred breeding, racing, and sales, they must exercise prudent fiscal stewardship while leveraging the endowment and blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's a lot of corporate speak to me. And Sikura wrote back, and again, quoting here from the TDN, he says, "The Breeders' Cup's response to my critique only defended their management of the $98.5 million endowment. That's typical of a non-responsive, self-congratulatory group. The concerns raised and possible solutions to the crisis in California were ignored and received no reply. John Gaines, the founder of the Breeders' Cup, often warned of, quote, self-appointed guardians of the turf, an apt description of the current state of affairs, a continuum of non-action and self-praise." I got to agree with Sikura here. That really was a non-answer by the Breeders' Cup. It said nothing about what the money could potentially be used for, why they have to be sitting on so much of it, and especially with California racing, who has kind of made more hay in California in the last 20 or so years than the Breeders' Cup. Like the event is constantly out there at Santa Anita and Del Mar, because obviously the weather is always great. So they don't have to worry about, rain or races, turf races being jeopardized. It's a very, very convenient thing for the Breeders' Cup to be able to go out to California, and California racing is struggling. So I don't think it's a great look to parachute in for the Breeders' Cup every year and then be sitting on $100 million while California racing is scrapping to survive. And there is a world potentially where in 5 years, Santa Anita does not exist. And I hope that's not the case, but it's a danger. And you talk to anybody who's remotely involved in California racing, and they'll tell you the same thing. John, I know it's a little tricky for you. You're on the Breeders' Cup board, but this is not the first time this has been brought up. As I mentioned, Mike Rapoli has talked about this, and in a business where we kind of have to all have each other's backs, especially the states that are struggling. I think it's personally not a good look for the Breeders' Cup to have this much money just sitting in an account. Like like John Sikura says, what kind of rainy day are we waiting for? There needs to be some investment in California racing, especially if you're going to hold your signature event there basically every year.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a couple of things, Joe. Again, nothing in this industry is straight line A to B. Yes, they're sitting on a ton of money, and again, I've been on the Jockey Club. I'm not on the executive board, but I guess I'm elected official for the past few years, and I can tell you that there isn't a lot of communication from the corporate office to the rest of us when it comes to what decisions are being made, where things are going. Even down to like there's supposed to be, I think, subcommittees that some of us are supposed to be assigned to or report to. I haven't been involved in any of those. Not that I'm the end all or be all. That being said, I don't know if it falls under the Breeders' Cup's jurisdiction to save racing in a particular region or a particular racetrack. Should they be doing something with the money? Yeah, you would like to think that if they have $100 million of the industry's money tied up, that probably makes them one of the deepest pocketed organizations that are associated with the industry. So would it be great for them to be able to utilize the money for something else? Absolutely. Is it their responsibility to bail out and part of an industry? I don't think it's necessarily their responsibility to do that. But I, as somebody who's in the industry, would love to see the deeper pocketed organizations come out and say, this is what we're actually going to use the money for. So at least then we have an idea as an industry. Okay, because there's so many holes in the dam right now that if we knew that the Breeders' Cup was going to put their finger in one of them, then it's like, okay, we can, as an industry, put our resources and our energies into some of these other issues at hand, so we know exactly what to fight for. But yeah, it would be nice to know what their plans are for the money. So at least as an industry, we would have a sense of, okay, this is why the money is being utilized. To say that it's in a $100 million account with Bessemer Trust and that we have the I forget exactly how John, the Breeders' Cup actually put it, but basically we need to be stewards of this money. You're right. You do need to be stewards of the money, but not so it rides strictly with the way that the investment industry is directing it. And I'm sure that they're putting monies towards some nonprofits and some organizations and, the win your ins that cost money to be paid for and all those things. But yeah, as an industry insider, I would love to know more about where the money is actually being directed and what the goals are for the money, other than, hey, we want to make sure that goal number one basically is that we have the money tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And it doesn't necessarily have to be California racing. Although, again, like I said, for an organization that uses the infrastructure of California racing to host its signature event, I would think you bear some responsibility to make sure that California racing is going to be around in 5 years. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could be aftercare. Like there's all sorts of like you say, holes in the dam that, kind of need to be filled up. And I agree. Like, I think the main thing is that was such a non-answer to what he said that you got to at least say kind of what your plan is for the money, rather than, oh, well, it's gaining interest. That's, basically that's all we can tell you right now. And I think that he makes a good point. I hope people stay on this because, there are a ton of things that money could go towards. And I think overall the Breeders' Cup does a great job, like with their event. And, they've kind of, created a calendar of races to kind of lead up to that. I think that's something that didn't exist 10 years ago. That's been a big success. So I'm not like saying the Breeders' Cup is useless or any of that stuff. They obviously, perform a very vital role in the industry. But yeah, like if someone asks you, like, why are you sitting on $100 million? You got to have a better answer than, well, it's in the account. Don't worry about it. It's just like John said, I think you need to have like a kind of if not a specific plan, like a general answer as to what that money is eventually going to be used for. So I'm curious to see.
Hopefully they weren't going to use it to bet on goal oriented for the 2026 over under how many graded stake races he was going to win.
You know, I almost said you got to be goal oriented with that money, but I didn't want to be too cute. But yeah, so it's interesting. I'm curious to see if there's like any more back and forth with Sikura and the Breeders' Cup on that. You know, especially because, like I said, I'm worried about California racing, and I think a lot of people are. You know, speaking of big money, there was a great result for our friends at DJ Stable last night, recording this on Tuesday. Yesterday, he's so modest. He's so embarrassed. Look at him. You talking about me? Oh my God, what a little sweetie pie. 3.2 million is what Tiffany Case hammered for at Keeneland January. Mandy Pope was the buyer. Shout out to Mandy Pope. Talk about someone who puts a lot of money into the industry. So yeah, I mean, I'll toss it to John. Obviously, this was kind of blown up off of the success of her daughter, Nitrogen, presumptive champion 3-year-old filly. And John, I don't know, like, what was the, how did that go relative to your expectations?
Oh, it was beyond our expectations. No question about that. You know, when we went ahead back in April and decided that we were going to do a reduction, Tiffany Case was one of the mares that we were keeping. And quite frankly, we got such a huge, overwhelming response, positive response for the 32 mares that we put into the sale, all of them sold, that at that moment, my dad and I sat down with Jeff Hazlett and Mark Taylor from
TaylorMade, shout out,
and said, "What do you think the possibilities are for Tiffany Case?" And we sat down and put together kind of a game plan and some talking points, and then we sat down with Tony Lacey and his team over at Keeneland and hashed out a plan pretty quickly as far as what we anticipated, you know, we needed to implement from a sales and marketing standpoint, and also what our expectations were. And we were all kind of on the same page as far as what the expectations were. Then, you know, she had to be sales prepped. She had to stay pregnant. Not this time, who she was in Falto, had to continue to do what he was doing on the racetrack. And what ended up happening is everything lined up perfectly, Joe. And we went through and looked at every single buyer who bought a horse for we bought a broodmare for an average of $650,000 or more. And there were like 50, groups that did that last year in 2025. And I would say that 30 something of them had Tiffany Case as a one show or a shortlist show of like 2 or less at TaylorMade. So we felt pretty good that she was on a lot of the right people's radars and shortlists. And this mare in the Keeneland January sale was not going to get overlooked. It wasn't going to be like somebody said, "Oh, I didn't know you weren't selling her," because the marketing game plan was so well thought out and implemented by our friends at Keeneland. And it got to the point where, you know, we said, okay, this is what we thought she was going to bring. It looks like she's going to bring more. Joe, from a strategy standpoint, we didn't change our reserve because we wanted people to feel good that they were bidding against each other and not necessarily against a reserve. So really, you know, early on, it was live money only. It was live money. And, you know, there were people who were trying to bid on the internet that couldn't get a bid in fast enough at like $2 million, $2.5 million, because there was still such a frenzy going on in the pavilion itself. From 2.5 million or so until 3.2, it was just 2 buyers, and they were going, you know, hammer and tong against each other in $50,000 increments all the way up to $3.2 million. But I couldn't be happier with where Tiffany Case is going to end up, which is at Whisper Hill in Lexington. She's going to get spoiled rotten, as well she should. And I really wish, Mandy Pope and the rest of her team the best of luck with Tiffany Case and with this in utero foal, which is a colt. And hopefully, more and more foals, going forward. But it couldn't have worked out any better. I think that, obviously anytime you have a horse that's in the upper 25th percentile of any sale, money's going to chase it. But yeah, Joe, we were ecstatic with the way that everything played out. And especially because I know that Tiffany Case is going to a really good farm.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, you gotta strike while the iron's hot. And obviously the nitrogen iron is super hot right now. Same thing happened with Super Simple, who was the dam of Super Corridora. She was supplemented very late to the Keeneland September sale. And I forget exactly what she sold for, but it was a lot. And this is what you dream about, especially with a what was she, $320,000 buy in 2019. So basically 10x, and that's if you have a good mare that has a good result, that's a good way to sustain your business. So congratulations to everybody, DJ Stable and TaylorMade in full to Not This Time as well. So that certainly helped. But yeah, very good result, and can't wait to see all the fireworks you make at the March sale and April sale with some of that money. Rail Talk is sponsored by Facing Tipton. Shout out to the team at Facing Tipton and Express Kid, who sold for $800,000 at the flash sale. We talked about it a little bit last week. Express Kid, who was an impressive winner of the Springboard Mile, another really, really nice potential 3-year-old on the Derby Trail, won by 6 1/4, sold to Brad Clevin, son of Bodie Express. He was offered as a horse of racing age by Paramount Sales. Those flash sales have obviously been very successful. So too the digital sales. The January digital sale is right around the corner. It starts later this week, Thursday, January 15th, and runs through next Tuesday, January 20th. So definitely get involved there. The Kentucky Winter Mix sale is also coming up, the first brick and mortar sale of the year on February 9th in Lexington. And then the February digital sale, February 19th through the 24th. You can still enter horses in that now, which I believe that John and DJ are going to be taking advantage of.
Yeah, we really are, Joe. We've been holding back some inventory with the idea that this February digital sale is going to be the place that we want to go ahead and put them. And there's no reason not to, especially with the success that Facing Tipton has had and shown as the leader of the digital sale industry.
All right, that sound you hear is not just John's furnace on the fritz. It is also the slow burn of the Derby Trail heating up. And we are kind of getting into the first 3-year-old preps of the year. This Saturday, it starts with the Lecomte Stakes at Fairgrounds. And I've said this before, but I just got to shout out the Fairgrounds racing secretary, because they do a great job. Like in an era where there's a lot of 5 and 6 horse fields and a lot of cars that they have trouble filling all over the country. That is not the case at Fairgrounds. Like they typically on these big Saturdays, they're running 13 races on Saturday. A lot of times they'll run 14 full fields for most of the stakes, including the Lecomte. This is $250,000 going a mile and a 16th. I should have looked up how many Derby points it was before I started talking, but we'll pop that onto the graphic a little bit later on. It's a pretty wide open race. Like there's no superstar horse in here, but I mean, just looking at the buyer figures, like the top buyers for these horses: Quality Mischief, 80, Carson Street, 79, Crown the Buckeye, 85, Golden Tempo, 78, Thunderbuck, 81, Mesquite, 80, White Tiger, 83, Ocelli, 78, Stop the Car, 80, and Chip Honcho, 82. So take your pick. Like I hate to go all in an 11 horse field, but if there were ever a race where you want to, at least go deep, this looks like the one. It's obviously in a race like this, I think it's going to come down to post. I think the narrow horse to beat is on the outside and Chip Honcho for Steve Asmussen. But you draw the 11 hole, kind of a short run to the first turn. He did win the gun runner. I would be betting against him, but again, he's going to be like 3-7-2, 4-1. So it's not like you got to go crazy betting against him. I'm a little interested in Mesquite for Cherie DeVoe. This is the kind of horse that, I think is like a typical Cherie horse. He started first time out, didn't really show any speed, kind of moved up mildly in the stretch to be 6th, and then closed in a big way next time out, went from 11th to 1st in the maiden race at Churchill Downs. It's by Union Rag, so you got to think he's going to get better going longer. Flavian Pratt is riding, which obviously never hurts. I think there's like a good amount of speed in here that's going to set up for his late kick. There's plenty of ways you can go in here, but to me, long term, I think he's the horse that's most interesting to me. Thunderbuck is also pretty interesting too. Brad Cox trained, son of gun runner, Calumet farm homebred. There's a lot of ways to go in here, John. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, Joe, I'm looking at it more along the lines of what we just talked about with stallions. And do you go with the new shiny new object or the old proven? There's 11 horses in here. You got an Into Mischief, Street Sense, Candy Ride, Curlin, Gun Runner, Union Rags, Constitution, Connect, Maximum Security, and Connect. The only thing that's missing is one Yaupan. Okay. Everything else, the other 10 horses are by older, more proven stallions. So I know that's not what you asked me, which is, who do you think is going to win the Lecomte? But again, as you're looking at these Derby campaigns, and I know it's only one race, but as you're looking at these Derby campaigns and preps, again, you look at, are there any first year stallions? There's one. The other 10 horses in the race are sired by what I would call proven stallions. Maybe you'd say Maximum Security is kind of on the fence on that. So 9 out of the 11, you know what you're getting. You're going to get a 2-turn horse when it comes down to it. So again, it's a little counterintuitive to the quote unquote commercial only new sires that people are gravitating to these days.
Yeah, and I'm, personally rooting for the 9 Ocelli, who's going to be a bit of a price, not just because he was a $12,000 facing October grad. I like to see those horses have success, but he's a half brother to a colt by early voting. Shout out to Tailor Made that we bought last year at the September sale. So we're, it's got a. I always like when you got a half brother or a half sister that jumps up and runs big, makes you excited for the future. So yeah, the super betting race. Like I haven't bet like a bunch this year yet out of choice, out of being a little tired of the CAWs and all that. But if I'm going to get involved, this is the kind of card you want to get involved in with big fields, 13 races, lots of different opportunities and options. So that's, looking forward to that on Saturday. And that'll really kind of kick off the Derby trail in earnest. We are going to have our draft, our Derby contest draft on February 17th. So mark your calendars for that. I think we might even have another person this year. We might have six contestants, John. Is that correct?
Yeah. Do you want to make the announcement, Joe?
Yeah, it's our buddy, Andrew Stewart. We're going to have a Kiwi. Now, the biggest challenge is going to be remembering the time zone difference, because we absolutely never remember what it is when we have Andrew on the show. So we're going to have to figure out how to schedule everybody, and then Andrew's 17 hours ahead of us to do the draft. But I think that'll be interesting to get some kind of international perspective on the Derby contest. And then I think all the rest of the familiar faces will be back with Sam and Michelle and Dan. So we're looking forward to that. And John, as the defending champion, Sam has a lot to live up to. And I'm going back to it. I'm glad I didn't run last, because there was a little while there where I thought I was going to run last.
We all did. And I have to say that some of us more than others were hoping that was going to be the case, Joe. But not me, my friend, because you and I are always simpatico about all this stuff. But
hater in the house.
What's that?
Hater in the house.
Yeah,
shout out to Stuart.
Not us. Not me. How dare you? I want to know, and maybe the audience can help us with this, is to figure out a creative way as to how we can pick, the alignment of the snake draft, of who's going to get first pick. I think last year, Julia did it, and that was great because she is as honest as the day is long. But is there something like maybe we want Julia to dress up in a duck costume and have to pick out little ducklings out of a pond, or send us your thoughts and wishes, and we'll see if we can make it happen. Right, Jewel? You okay with that, Julia?
John forgets that we can't hear the producer actually on the mic. She said she was down, though. She said 100%. She's in all the way in. And Julia is the CEO of games on this show, so she's gonna have to chip in at some point this year. So yeah, looking forward to that, and just want to take that opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the 3-year-old performances that I've been most impressed by so far this year. I don't want to spoil what I'm looking for in the draft, but a couple horses that caught my eye. Nearly is a 3-year-old by not this time. Centennial Farm has the top buyer of the 3-year-old so far this year. It's obviously early, but he ran a 96 going 7 furlongs. So happy over the weekend in the San Vicente short field, but ran a 96 as well. Commandment I thought was really impressive in the Macho Man on January 3rd at Gulfstream, horse that I think is going to be better going longer. Brad Cox trains. And then, friend of the show, friend of us, Strategic Risk for Mark Cassidy, I thought was very, very impressive in the Smarty Jones at Oak Lawn. It's cool to see those John Oxley colors winning, because I feel like Oxley was Mark Cassidy's primary owner in terms of high class horses for a long time. And I feel like he's scaled back a little bit, although he does have part of a Flightline horse that we're really excited about. Later, in 2026 to look out for. But yeah, it was great to see those classic silks and a horse that I think is very interesting going forward on the Derby trail.
And just in, Julia said that I get the number one pick.
Oh yeah. That one finger that she stuck up.
That means
to
I get the number
Definitely.
one pick, right? Yeah, exactly. So she's very enthusiastic and excited about our Derby contest in a month.
Yeah, you see what we're dealing with in the group chat, but it's all love. You got to be able to hate the people you love sometimes. So let's go, Jules. All right, so that's going to do it for episode 119 of Rail Talk. Thank you to my co-pilot, John Green, as always. Shout out to our producer, Patty Wolf, and our associate producers, Julia Agresta and Nathan Wilkinson. As I forgot to mention in the open, make sure you subscribe to the show. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible. We appreciate you. We love you. The subscriptions are going through the roof. So are the views. And we thank you for doing it and being part of the Rail Talk family. We appreciate every single person who tunes in every week. We love doing the show for you. And we'll see you next week back here on Rail Talk.